fade green? Are you an ultimate Eagles football fan? Well, you're in the right place. Ready? This is Birds 365, hosted by the new Mac and Mac, Jody McDonald and John McMullen.
Here we go.
Who collectively have covered and talked about more than 50 plus years of Eagles football. Kick off your day with Birds 365. You'll get debate.
We love to argue.
You'll get the real story from inside the locker room. And you'll hear from some of the great football minds from around the region. You're about to become an Eagles insider. Get in the game. Join Jody Mack and Johnny Mack and join the football community that flocks to Birds 365. Birds 365 starts right now.
Welcome to the NFL. Let's go! Let's go! Go! And a good football Friday morning, Birds fans. You got Mac and Mac here with you. I'm Birds 365, McMullen and McDonald here with you. Not getting ready to talk about the NFC Championship game like we did last year. No, we're talking about the reconstruction of the Philadelphia Eagles. A lot has gone down since they lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a couple of weeks ago in the opening round of the playoffs. A little bit of a different Eagle team is going to take the field in 2024. But Nick Sirianni's still going to be running. And the question is, who are going to be his two top lieutenants? We know on the defense, John. We don't know on the offense. But I do want to talk about the defense first. Here on Birds 365, we talked yesterday about Vic Fangio coming in and being the new defensive coordinator, even though he was the defensive coordinator of the Miami Dolphins about 20 minutes before he became the defensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles. You ever going to get that backstory? You ever going to get those details on how that went down? Probably not, right?
I think we will, for the most part. At some point, I think it from, more so probably the Miami side than anything else. And I'm close to a couple guys down there. So, I had, for instance, I asked about last season and last year, and there's this narrative that, Vic could have changed his mind if Jonathan Gannon would have admitted that he was contacted by Monty Ossenfort a little bit earlier. And from their perspective down there, there was no wavering from any perspective. The contract was agreed to $4.5 million per year, the highest paid coordinator contract in NFL history. So there was no inkling of it from that side. There was no concern over Miami. They didn't start looking. They didn't say, oh, we better start looking for Vic might back out of this deal. And I was told from early on, and to his credit, he's too professional to Josh McDaniels, somebody. That's what I was told very early on in the process. And that turned out to be true because he wanted to be here, but he wasn't going to Josh McDaniels him. He kept his word. And then as you fast forward this time around, from Miami's perspective, it was like you saw Drew Rosenhaus, I assume, yesterday. I don't know why Drew was talking about it, but he said a bunch of players weren't happy with the way he ran things down there, kind of an old school guy. And that's understandable. That tends to happen in the NFL. You see it here all the time. You get kicked on the way out the door a little bit. But from their perspective, I just don't think they felt they got the value for that $4.5 million, and they understood that Mike McDaniel would be comfortable with somebody else, more comfortable with somebody else, and they said, if you want to go. We won't hold it against you. So I think it works out from both perspectives. I don't think Miami cares that much to complain about any potential issues, and I think the Eagles are happy they finally got the guy they wanted all along. So I think it's tied in a happy little bow until you get back on the football field and you say, oh, we're running the same scheme.
Here's the guy I'd like to hear from, and that's McDaniels, because well, you're right. It's 2020 as you're going out the door. Hindsight that not all the players like. Okay, if he was still a defense coordinator, would we have heard that this week? I don't think so. I think that would have been kept under wraps. So it's a take a shot because you can as he's going out the door, which, in my opinion, is a little weak, but not the first time ever Drew Rosenhaus did something like that. The guy I'd like to hear from is the head coach. If you're a new school, new wave, kind of outside the box, a little bit goofy to begin with, head coach like Mike McDaniels, why are you hiring Vic Fangio? If you know that he's been around forever, and the Eagles will be his 10th different team in the NFL that he's coached for it. So he's seen it all, done it all, and is old school. Balancing the scales because McDaniels is so new school and out there and different and borderline weird that you needed an old school guy to bounce him. I don't understand the hire to begin with, that after less than 12 months you go, all right, hey, you want to walk away? Go ahead, fine. We'll go in another direction. What was their direction to begin with?
Well, I don't know. I can ask people down there. The assumption I get with Mike McDaniels, he's more of the offensive head coach, and it's not necessarily his decision.
Okay.
And very similar to Sean McVay, his one of his cohorts in the Shanahan tree, that Washington coaching staff, which is becoming the 2013 Washington coaching staff, is becoming the 1999 Andy Reid coaching staff. I get the assumption, if you think about when Sean McVay first went to the Rams, they gave him Wade Phillips for that exact same reason. And he didn't even pay attention. I say it all. When the defense was on the field, he'd be on the bench looking down, talking to the quarterback, worrying about the offense, and Wade would handle the defense. And as things have gone on, he's gotten more involved and things like that. And I think the same thing will happen with Mike McDaniel. But certainly early in his career, I think it was, all right, we're going to give you the best defensive mind in football with the best reputation, and we'll see how it works. And they were better defensively than they were the year prior, and they suffered a lot of injuries late, which is obviously not Vic's fault. But at the end of the day, when guys like Jalen Ramsey and their edge rushers, Chubb and who's the UCLA kid? I'm forgetting. But when they were on the field and they were healthy, they were good. And when they weren't very good.
All right. Goes back to talent. You and I say it all the time.
I mean, it's amazing to me. I mean, the switch isn't going to come on. Now, Vic's been around. Boy, man, I don't know. He's with the Philadelphia Stars, so that's how long he's been around. He's been around a very long time, and he's a very good defensive coach. And he's certainly going to be better than Sean Desai. And he's known more defensive football than just about anybody else has ever learned to begin with. But if they don't improve the personnel, it doesn't matter. These guys aren't magicians.
Right.
And you see it. And as I mentioned, he gave up 56 points this year to granted, a very good football team, the Baltimore Ravens, who might, win the Super Bowl. That's how good they are. But 56 is 56. You can't create something out of nothing. You need talent.
And one of the stats that I saw, there's a lot of different ways you can evaluate defense via numbers and analytics and the like. And overall, their defense was certainly improved from where it was the year before. Did it get to the heights that they wanted it to? If it did, I don't think they would just want to let him walk out the door. But as you correctly point out, they were just crushed by injury. As the season went on, their playoff game, they're down to guys coming off the edge that they signed like 20 minutes before the game started. Yeah. They're picking guys up off the scrap heap. And there's one thing to pick a guy up off the scrap heap week 2. There's another thing to pick up the guy off the scrap heap week 19. That means everybody has had a chance to pass him over 17 times, and they said thank you, no. So I'm going to cut him some major slack for the postseason. But his success rate at the sack success rate was 8.8, which was second best in the National Football League. Now, they don't have a Bosa brother playing defensive end for them. So they've got very good guys, talented guys. Got Phillips went down with an injury and the like. To finish second in the sack rate, you know what that tells me, John? It's Jonathan Gannon all over again. Last year, the Philadelphia Eagles got 70 sacks, and people still hated in this town. A portion of the Eagle fan base hated Jonathan Gannon because he didn't blitz. Well, when you're getting 70 sacks, you don't have to blitz. Why would you blitz? You want to keep as many in coverage as you can. And apparently Fangio did a lot of that and had success in Miami as the second best blitz sack rate in the National Football League.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Phillips, that's who I was trying to come up with. Jalen Phillips, tremendous player. Bradley Chubb, maybe they're not Bosa brothers, but yeah, I mean, that's been his history. I mean, the Eagles have run his scheme. He doesn't want to blitz. It's about the extra guy. We always talk about the +1 on offense. For him, it's about the +1 on defense. He wants that extra guy to be in coverage as much as possible. And then you blitz in certain situations, 3rd and long. He's probably going to be better with a feel for that. He's probably going to teach it better, which is, to me, even the more important part. But if you look at the Eagles blitz, the Eagles blitz percentage this year was 22%. Miami's was 21.5%. I mean, it's the philosophy of his defense. Now, if you go back to Chicago and San Francisco, when you got guys like Khalil Mack and winning Defensive Player of the Year, you don't need the blitz. And it looks great. Akeem Hicks was one of the most underrated players in the NFL. So you had two. San Francisco had some tremendous, but it always goes back to personnel. It always goes back to personnel. And that's a lot of the difference between the 2022 Eagles defense and the 2023 Eagles defense. But he will teach it better. And he will have a better feel for calling the game than Sean Desai. So it should get better, even if you don't increase the personnel greatly. But if you don't, it's not going to be great.
No, and we'll talk about Vic Fangio today. We'll talk about the offensive coordinator. Who knows? Maybe by the time we come back on Monday, we'll know who the Eagles' offensive coordinator is going to be. The last couple of days have all been about relationships, Sirianni keeping his job, he and Howie Roseman. But at some point, the worm will turn, and the staff will be close to set. And then the attention will be paid to Howie Roseman, because part of the press conference the other day was talking about roster construction. And they're putting eggs in that Nakobe Dean basket already before we even get there through the offseason. Yeah, it's going to become Howie who's going to be the focus of this team, because he needs to regroup and upgrade the talent specifically on the Vic Fangio side, which is one of the reasons why I'm okay with this signing. I like Fangio. I think Fangio has accomplished plenty in this National Football League, even though this little birdie keeps whispering in my ear. Everyone's figured out the Fangio defense. Everyone's figured out the Fangio. I don't know where I hear that, but I hear it all the time.
Well, the good news about that is, Jody, he already knows that. He talked about it in Miami last year before the season. And he's, he didn't always play this defense. So he's the guy, at least instead of the copy, now they have the original. I think he's the first one who understands there needs to be tweaks, because too many people have been playing it and too many people have figured it out. And I think he knows that, and I think he will tweak. Will it be successful? I think that is tied more toward personnel. I think it always is.
And one of the things I like about it is, we'll find out if it works, how it fits with what the Eagles have, what the Eagles are yet to get land on the defense. One thing that I am just crossing my fingers and hope it has as a residual effect is this is a Roseman guy. Howie was in big part of bringing him in to let him consult last year. You think Nick was tampering with Vic Fangio on the phone with him? Go, hey, if Miami will let you out of the contract, we'll hire you immediately here in Philadelphia. No, of course I was Howie. So this is going to be a Howie guy coming in. Now, Nick did say that he appreciates the relationship they were able to build up last year when he was a consultant for the Eagles. So it isn't like he's being foisted on Sirianni. I think Sirianni's perfectly fine.
He's my voice word. I stole your voice word. I'll push back on that a little bit. You know, Vic's like everybody's guy. He was part of the program. I compare it to college. Friend of the program, and Nick likes him a lot. That's true. Jonathan liked him a lot. Everybody, Jeffrey likes him. Everybody wanted him. So I think that's it truly is a collaborative process. But to Howie's point, and Jeff McClain came out this week. This is the first time I saw it. Now I was told way back to the Doug Peterson, and you've heard me say numerous times, high-level coaching change about one guy in this organization, one guy, and that's Jeffrey Lurie, not Howie. So if you want to blame somebody, blame Jeffrey Lurie. I've been saying that for a long time, dating back to Doug Peterson, because I was told by somebody who would know. It's Jeffrey on that type of thing. Now, Jeff found out that actually the Eagles setup, Nick Sirianni doesn't even report to Howie Roseman. They have it set up that Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman both report to Jeffrey Lurie. In other words, it's set up in a more traditional way. We saw Dave Canales and Carolina put it out in their press release. They have it set up where the GM, the coach doesn't report to the GM. They both report to David Tepper. Evidently, that's how the Eagles have set it up. Now, he trusts Howie more. So when it comes to advice and things like that, he's been around Howie longer. Certainly, I would say Howie has more power. But when it comes to high-level coaching decisions, I've been saying it for years, it's one guy. It's one guy. And he makes that decision on his own. And I would consider coordinators, high-level coach, obviously head coaches, but coordinators as well. And after that, it's up to Howie and Nick to position coaches to figure it out together.
All right. So you think that Jeff Lurie was the guy who got Vic Fangio?
Well, I think everybody likes Vic. I don't think Vic's an issue with anybody. Vic was around the team, friend of the program, consultant leading up to the Super Bowl. They wanted him before. Everybody was on board with that. Nick's on board. Howie's on board. Jeffrey's on board. Everybody's on board with Vic Fangio.
All right. And if Jeff Lurie's that guy, he's on board. Here's why I like it. Howie knows it. And if Howie is still protecting his own backside and Jeff was really on board with that, maybe I better get him some improved defense. Maybe they'll use some of their resources, free agency and draft capital on the defensive side more than they have in previous years if they want to give Vic Fangio a shot to make his defense work there. And I think that is of need, so I'm good with that. He is McMullen on McDonald. We see Joe Santoliquito in the waiting room. He of Bleeding Green Nation, little Inquirer work on the side. We're going to talk Eagles football at a very in-depth article on the Eagles and specifically the quarterback relationship between Jalen Hurts and the entire Eagle coaching staff. Joe Santoliquito joins us next here on Birds 365.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
At Pond Lehocky, we've recovered billions of dollars for our clients, and we're confident we can do the same for you. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured clients obtain some of the largest settlements in Pennsylvania. One conversation is all it takes to help you and your family get back on track. If you've been injured in an accident, give Pond Lee Hockey a call.
They're carving them up and good play calling along the way. First and goal at the 6.
On the field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Underdog Fantasy has a way for you to play alongside your favorite football team all season long with their fantasy pick'em game. You pick between 2 to 5 players, select whether they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats, then do what you usually do on a Sunday, watch the games. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. It's a fantasy game, and the Sports Betting Show wants you to get involved. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. When you sign up, use the promo code WIN, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
For the big story on Action News,
search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Appreciate you being with us here on Birds 365. Mac, and Joe Santoliquito, old friend. Good enough to hop on board with us today. Good to see you, Joe. Where's Alabama? Are you trying to tell us?
Yeah, guys. Can you hear me?
We got you.
Yeah,
and
got
just
you.
wondering, why the Alabama gear today?
I got it as a Christmas gift, and I'm a big Saban fan. I know he just retired, but yeah, I just love the program, love the players they produce. So yeah, little since I was a kid, since Bear, since Tom Clements broke my heart as a 5-year-old, throwing that pass, I think in the Sugar Bowl, I believe it was.
Tom Clements.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Are the Eagles interviewing Tom Clements for their offensive coordinator position?
Yeah.
Throw him in the mix. New ideas.
Before I do anything, let me ask the two of you, because I've been running around the last 2 days asking almost everybody that I know. Did I block you two guys did my social media block you two guys on Twitter?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Not an issue on my end.
Okay. Okay.
Not an issue on my end.
Okay.
Yeah, you're a big deal, so you got somebody else running your Twitter.
Yeah, she's law enforcement, which I enlisted her in after the obviously the Wentz escapade, and her new nickname is Lady Block Party D. She just went nuts.
I like that.
So the last 2 or 3 days, I've had like 40 people, 45 people, friends, family that I had to unblock. So, and the reason why I asked if I blocked you two guys,
we're good.
Blocked the two of you.
I'm not worried about that.
Yeah.
Yo, let me start
I
here.
of all people shouldn't be blocked, Joe. But yeah, I don't care. I don't care.
No, we're good. Here's why I want to start with you, Joe, because I read your article and it was fascinating and in depth and very well done.
Thank you.
About Jalen Hurts, because I did say this last year when he signed the $250 million cut. This is not good, guys. It's different, but I said, here's my only concern with Jalen Hurts, that he's going to be pulled in so many different directions. I wasn't afraid that he was going to become a diva or anything like that, because he does have the work ethic that he has. But I just thought there was a chance that he could be like distracted by all the attention that he's getting from people outside of his own inner circle, the NFL, his agency, endorsements. You knew the Eagles were going to ask him to be a front man for a lot of things going into the season. How big a negative effect do you believe that had on his season?
I think it had a big negative effect. I think it took him out of his routine. He is an individual routine. You guys read the story, as opposed to many others that criticized the story and didn't read it. You guys read the story. Never said he wasn't a hard worker. I've said it on the air. I've said it privately. The guy applies himself. The guy does work hard. He loves to work. And he was pulled in many different directions. It was a brave new world for him. I understand the situation he was in. What's the saying? Strike while the iron is hot. He was a hot name. You turn around, you make that extra cash when you can make it. But it also was something new for him. Do I think in the future, by the way, if he does have a situation similar to what he came off of 2022, I think he's going to be able to handle that better. I think he's going to be able to allot his time better. But I think there was a lot of trial by error this offseason. And I think it's certainly something that he will correct. Jalen Hurts may be a lot of things, but one, he's a hard worker. He is someone that's a diligent guy. He is someone that I'll give him credit for this. I think he does a very good job of self-correcting, and it's something that he's had to do since his college career.
Yeah. He's had a lot of changes, and I think a lot of people who compare it to your Wentz story, which, by the way, you can spike the football because everything eventually was proven to be true. So all the people saying hit piece this, hit piece that. First of all, this wasn't a hit piece. I mean,
thank you for that.
For those people, you have to read it. But from Jalen's perspective, he has mentioned a number of times, I've asked him, he's still feeling out his off seasons. I think one of the improvements was going to Tom House and Adam Dedew in the 2022 off season and working on his mechanics. And I know he went back. And I bring that up because Carson Wentz did the same thing before his MVP season. And those are the guys. Tom and Adam are the guys when it comes to mechanics and modern quarterbacking. They're the best in the business. And Carson did it and never went back. I know Jalen went back, but I don't think he spent as much time. But what he has shown the ability to do is tweak his off-season routine. And I think you're right that he will do that, and he'll learn from his mistakes and he'll work diligently to improve them. My question is he working diligently enough with the people in the building when it comes to the current offense? Maybe that doesn't matter moving forward, but last season when we write the eulogy, I think he's a big part of the blitz issues. I think the quarterback was a big part of the blitz issues, and Brian Johnson and Nick Sirianni got most of the blame. What are your thoughts, and what did you find out about that?
Well, talking to a defensive coordinator who had faced him the previous season and this past season, he was blown away by the regression. What had happened here? Is it a Steichen, Brian Johnson transition? He was just kind of blown away by, here's a guy that could see things, pick things up, that suddenly he was completely blindsided with this past season. I think that's where a lot of confusion lies. I think, in my opinion, in my very strong opinion, there was a whole lot more reliance on A.J. Brown this season. As someone in the Eagles offense worded it to me, well, there were times I was open, but his first look was at A.J. If I were him, I would have looked at A.J. too, this player told me. But he didn't look for anybody else after that. It seemed as if and I have the strong impression with AJ himself, there was some frustration. I have the impression that, obviously he had that good run when the Eagles were going to him on a pretty consistent basis. When opposing teams learned and opposing teams, hey, listen, we have to add even more attention to A.J. Brown, which we knew they were doing anyway. This is what we have to do to take him out and force Hurts into, obviously, those uncomfortable situations where he has to look for others. And there's certainly a lot of other options that are very, very quality options to go to. But he became, I think he became a little bit too overly reliant on A.J. Brown. And I think that knocked off his game a little bit. And I also think Steichen was a very strong security blanket for him. Blanket being taken away. And when that happens, I think suddenly now I'm a little on my own. Brian and I have Brian Johnson and he had a very good relationship, a strong history together with one another. But I have the impression, again, a very strong impression. I certainly wasn't in the room with this, but I had the strong impression Steichen pushed him into those uncomfortable positions. I have the very, very strong assumption that because of that, we saw exponential growth from 2021 to 2022 with Jalen Hurts. And hopefully they're going to get someone back in there that could turn around and push some buttons, someone back in there that will put him in those uncomfortable spots. What's the old saying? You don't do business with family and friends. Yeah. And that may have been the case here. I think from the impression I have from the outside looking in, and John, you would know far better than me, I think Brian Johnson's a very quality quarterbacks coach. I still have some questions as to whether or not he's a quality NFL coordinator. But, he certainly did a hell of a job with Jalen in the 2022 season as the quarterbacks coach. Do I still think, again, from the outside looking in and the situation I was in, I still think there's some fine-tuning Brian Johnson himself can do. And I also have the impression, knowing people that know Brian, I think Brian, very much like Jalen Hurts, saw some things in himself that, hey, there's some things there, too, that I too, could have improved on.
For lack of a better term, I'm going to use it, and if you want to shape it any way you want, go ahead. This past year, good cop, bad cop, Nick Sirianni had to be the bad cop, and I don't think he's a real bad cop. But Brian Johnson wasn't going to be the bad cop in a relationship with the quarterback. Now Nick Sirianni's removed himself basically from the offense, and it's going to be all new, fresh.
I don't know if he removed himself.
Well, but, yeah.
Has been removed. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for correcting me, John. Good cop, bad cop. You sound like you're hoping that a bad cop comes in as the offensive coordinator, a guy who will coach him hard. Can Nick play good cop?
Nick's the personification of good cop.
Okay.
He's very much a coach, a player's coach in a lot of ways. And again, in all deference to John, I have the impression, I was actually told, Sirianni did, how crazy this may sound, he did a lot more coaching this season, but he also did quite a bit of coaching the coaches. He was not only juggling the balls he had to juggle, but, I'm looking here at the situation with Desai. I'm looking over here with the situation with Brian Johnson. He did more coaching of the coaches, which I'm going to give Nick Sirianni the benefit of the doubt here that he was not able to put all of his functions into everything he's supposed to do as a head coach. I think we saw some things there early on, signs where we saw it, I think, in the preseason. I think there was a situation where Desai didn't have the right personnel on the field, which was an ongoing problem the whole season, offensively and defensively with this team. And I think it was Sirianni himself who had to come running across the field to say, hey, listen, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
This is personnel
that was me. Training camp, they moved to practice to and Howie had to correct him to get it was just something that was very weird. And a bunch of us noted it at the time. The Eagles tried to sweep it under a rug. It wasn't a big deal. Yeah, I think it was a big deal.
It added up. I mean, think about the many times this season we'll go into the season opener where Jake Elliott just puts up his hands and says, this is special teams. They didn't have the right personnel on the field, even though Clay did a very good job this season. I think the special teams was one of the quality things they did. But then I believe again in the playoff game where was it Eli Ricks that didn't know whether or not he was on or off the field. They had to call a timeout again, and it was an ongoing problem the whole season. I'd like to believe that Nick Sirianni is as good as self-correcting as I hope and believe his quarterback is. But right now, too, I mean, guys, we're part of the ball brigade, the three of us here. I think all three of us would agree. All three of us know stability wins in the NFL. And the scary part of it right now, and the Eagles have been a decent organization in terms of stability. Now you're dealing with an organization that's going to be undergoing its third batch of coordinators in the last 3 years. I know the defense is somewhat immersed in the Fangio defense and the schemes there, but again, there's a whole new grouping of nomenclature these guys have to learn. There's going to be maybe a little bit of nuance here and there on the defensive side of the ball, and the most important thing is this: other than the defensive front, they're going to almost turn around and get a revamp, a whole new defense. Offensively, you're looking at a situation where, I mean, what's the deal with the offense? As we were talking, and again, in deference to John, I would hear from people and from NFL people, a couple of personnel people that I know. You know, Joe, you see this team, you watch this team, you dissect this team each week. Does it still have an identity? And that was the thing, too. That was mind-boggling as the season's going on. Where's this offensive identity of this team? I had a sense, well, I had better than a sense, some people on the ground floor that certainly wanted a certain type of identity. They certainly would have liked to have run the ball more than they did. There were guys, I feel there were guys that were underused. I hope they have a chance to retain DeAndre Swift. I think it was a big help to them this past season. I don't know if he's going to stay or not. We all know that the Eagles don't place value in running backs. So there's a lot of things that need to be done here. It's
and by the way, I think DeAndre, even if they want Joe, and I know you know DeAndre from St. Joe's prep days way back, I get the feeling that even if the Eagles wanted to pay him, he'd rather be in an offense that takes advantage of the running back in the passing game a little bit more than this one does.
I
don't know if that changes. I don't know if that changes no matter who this offensive coordinator is, because, and Jody knows, I've been talking about this, Joe doesn't like to dump it off. You don't need to dump it off. So that limits a lot of the running backs' touches in the passing game. And I think DeAndre would like to get more involved with that. But he is a Philly guy.
But I won't be surprised if it goes someplace else. No. I won't be surprised.
Neither would I.
But there's a lot of fixing that needs to go on here. I'd like to think, these are the first steps in terms of stability. I like the fact that they got someone older in Fangio. I mean, the Eagles, think about this. The Eagles like to get the shiny new coin, and they've had a history of that. But
it's the pendulum theory, Joe. Once something doesn't work, you go the opposite direction. Now you got to see.
They had a hell of a lot of stability with Andy Reid and Jim Johnson. A lot of stability, knowing the old man wasn't going anywhere, and knowing the guys that would come in would be immersed in a system that they knew, that they were oriented with. And you're not learning something. Again, they've been running basically the same Fangio, obviously the godfather of that bend but don't break defense type. But again, even we're getting the godfather himself with it. There's still some learning. There's still some time to teach. The other thing too that came up, and actually this came up last night in reference to Nick Sirianni to go godfather on you. I found it interesting on Wednesday that he went from Michael Corleone to suddenly he went to Fredo Corleone.
Oh, he's Fredo. Yeah, he's Fredo now. Well, that's a problem the Eagles have had consistently under Jeffrey Lurie. Once expectations aren't met, Mike Rowe was Fredo. Press Taylor was Fredo. Now it's Brian Johnson and Nick to a lesser degree. But, yeah, you can't say these guys are genius, up-and-coming, great young coaches, really ahead of the curve, and then turn around the next day and try to sell people, oh, they're the problem. But they try. That's what they do. kick people in the you-know-what out the door.
John, the other thing that baffles me is, do they think – I think they have a real problem. I think there's quite a bit to fix. My concern with this organization as a whole, as a culture, is, again, none of us are in that building, in those conference rooms with those guys. But the thing that concerns me a little bit is maybe they don't think there's that much wrong here. Maybe they don't.
Well, definitely. Definitely. Yeah. They're like, look at our success compared to everybody else. And to be fair, they're right, but that doesn't mean you got to be more self-aware when it comes to this particular issue, in my opinion.
And dropping and falling and going to 1-6 the way they finished. I mean, maybe there was one team at the end of the season, there was one team that was worse than the Philadelphia Eagles, and that might have been the worst team in the league, the Carolina Panthers. This was a disaster. We still don't know the situation with Jason Kelce, the ankle, that offensive line. I don't think I'm going out on a limb with this. I think Jason Kelce may stay one more year.
Hope so.
I think he wants to go out on his own. I think if he does stay, I have the utmost respect for Adam Schefter. But I think we have Adam Schefter in the bank if he does stay another year.
Yeah. Jason has changed his mind before. I do think I'm still in the camp. He's waiting for Travis to be done. He doesn't want to ruin his run. He'll do it on new heights, but I do think he's going to retire. I think Fletcher Cox might retire. By the way, keep that in the back pocket. So there could be a lot of changes at the NovaCare complex. But I hope Jason plays. He can still play. He was an all-pro.
Oh, my God, yeah.
Play at a high level.
Yeah. So there's lots of things.
Joe, no, you got to run. We appreciate you jumping in here, carving out a couple minutes for us today. We'll certainly get you back up again.
Okay.
Thanks, brother.
So, JD, listen, next time around, what do I need for you? For you, I will wear it. I will find the hoodie and I will wear it next time. What do you want me to go with?
The Albany Great Danes, my alma mater.
Albany Great
You know what?
Danes.
I probably can get an Albany Great Danes hoodie. They are a quality lacrosse team. I got some ins. Next time I'm on the air with you guys, I will wear an Albany Great Danes
hoodie. By the way, you got to get me some boxing swag, Joe. Something.
That's not a reach. I could do that. My bald brethren.
You don't. I don't need any boxing stuff. What is boxing swag? Gloves? Like I'm going to hit somebody? No, I'm not wearing them.
I could pick up some t-shirts and bags, stuff like that. I could do stuff like that. Sure. So, guys, listen. Thanks again, man. And please, from both of you, for you guys, I'm on here. Utmost respect to both you guys. I think the world of both of you.
Joe, we appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Joe.
We
appreciate it
with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
One quick note before we go to break on Jason Kelce. This is just my personal opinion. Here's where I felt buoyed this weekend. Not only when he did it, but then when he talked about it on the New Heights podcast thereafter. He's taken off his shirt in freezing cold temperatures in Buffalo while hanging with Taylor Swift, leaving the suite, coming down, grabbing the girl so he could bring her back up to meet Taylor Swift. And then afterwards, he talks about with his brother on the podcast and says, I informed my wife ahead of time I was going to do this. And she said, don't you dare. And he went ahead and did it anyway. Jason still likes the spotlight. He basically grabbed the spotlight by the throat and said, you are mine, spotlight.
Yeah.
I don't know that he's ready to give up the spotlight.
I hope you're right. I think but I've been wrong before. This is what he does, basically, and this is why we get it wrong, because after the season, he's always like, I don't want to go through this again.
Right.
And then you leave. Yeah. Then you recharge your batteries, and he's like, he misses the locker room. He misses the cafeteria. He loves the NovaCare cafeteria. So do I. I wish I could get back into it, but, and then he changes his mind. So it's always possible. But I do think he's been setting up not only his future, part of it is the New Heights podcast. By the way, Jeff Carr was on there this week. Jeff took a picture of his locker. So they said, thanks, Jeff, for ruining my personal time. But anyway, shout out to Jeff Carr. He's set up that he's also been working with the NFL and their sort of media boot camp, what they call it. He's been doing that for the past 2 years. He's got some off the field stuff he's been setting up. He's not the guy. He's not the NFL player that doesn't know what he's going to do when it ends for him. So I think he's got a plan, and I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, all that being said, yay or nay, Jason Kelce's back next year.
I say he's not back.
I say yes. And the scales for me were tipped this past weekend in Cleveland. I was kind of sitting on the fence, but I don't think he's ready to give it up. And the other reason why I was leaning that direction is lost 6 out of their last 7. Guess what? That means Jason Kelce lost 6 of his last 7. I don't think he wants to go out that way. He's part of it. Was he the main part of it? No. Oh my God, the Eagles fell apart because of Jason Kelce.
Well, he didn't play. He didn't play well in Tampa.
He didn't either. Exactly.
Yeah,
and I don't think Jason Kelce wants to go out that way. So
hey, I hope
you
you're
say
right.
out, I'll say in. We'll find out. Who knows when Jason? And that's one of the beauties of the situation, Jason. And he dictates all terms. He decides when and if, and he'll do the right thing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going, oh, Jason's going to drag the Eagles along. No. Jason will do the right thing by the Eagles.
Oh, yeah.
But he'll also do the right thing by Jason Kelce. So he's going to dictate terms. I think he's going to be it. All right.
And that's why, real quick, that's why you'll know it by the start of the new league year, which is March 14th, maybe, somewhere in that range. He will not leave the Eagles hanging.
I don't even think it will take that long. I think he'll make the decision after the Super Bowl, after free agency.
No, I'm just saying that's the last possible date.
Yeah, latest date. All right.
Yeah.
Birds fans, do me a favor. Here is your chance to save up to 40% on your car insurance. You can do that right now from one of JAKIB Sports' great partners. Here's what you do. Call managing partner Jim or Fran and tell them you're a friend of both JAKIB Sports and Birds 365.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, managing partner at Del Val Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
Any professional sports coach will tell you there's no substitution for preparation. At Malamut & Associates, that is a tenet by which we live. We prepare from day one for victory. Anything less is not acceptable.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction, go with trust,
Go Birds!
and go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Underdog Fantasy has a way for you to play alongside your favorite football team all season long with their fantasy pick'em game. You pick between 2 to 5 players, select whether they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats, then do what you usually do on a Sunday. Watch the games. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. It's a fantasy game, And the Sports Betting Show wants you to get involved. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. When you sign up, use the promo code WIN, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Thank Joe Santoliquito for jumping in with us here on Birds 365. Oh, we got a good guest coming up in less than half an hour from now. Our very own D. Gunn, Sports Take and Eagles Postgame Show here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. We haven't had D. Gunn on in, at least a couple of months, maybe longer than that. And he's during Eagle season, he's on the channel enough, so we don't want to overburden him. But hey, if you're talking about getting responses from players, D. Gunn's as tight it as anybody who covers Eagles these days. So looking forward to talking about D. Gunn. But here's one thing I want to talk to you about, John. You brought it up just before we punched Joe up about the flow chart of power in the Eagles organization. That Jeff Lurie certainly sits at the top. Everybody knows it, and as well should be. And then you're telling me the next level is the same. Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni, the coach and the general manager, both report directly to the owner. That it isn't how Jeffrey, then Howie, then Nick, and Nick reports to Howie Roseman. We talk all the time about Howie being one of the most dug-in general managers in all of the National Football League, that he can do certain things because his job really isn't in jeopardy and he's not being scrutinized on a day-in, day-out basis because A, he's been good, and B, he's got the relationship that he has with Jeff Lurie. But he doesn't even have power over the coach. Are we overestimating the power of one Howie Roseman? Because a lot of teams in the National Football League, owner, general manager, coach. I experienced it firsthand as a Jet fan years ago when Woody Johnson tried to do both the coach and the general manager report directly to him. All you get is infighting from the coach, and the coach is pointing the finger at the general manager's pointing the finger at coach. Just personally, I believe it runs best when you have a three-tiered setup with the general manager between the owner and the coach. What does it say about Howie Roseman if he isn't in control of the coach?
I don't think it says all that much. I think it's like I said, I used Carolina. Carolina actually put it in their press release, the setup.
How'd that work out?
Well, I don't know if I'm talking about they hired Dave Canales. So,
you're talking about going forward. Okay.
Yeah, going forward. Obviously, it's a disaster of an organization, but this is not the first time. And by the way, it was Jeff McClain. I'm just saying, so I'll read you what Jeff wrote. Eagles head coach Nick Sirianni doesn't report to GM Howie Roseman. He reports directly to owner Jeffrey Lurie. While it may be true that Roseman is more entrenched than Sirianni and more of a confidant to Lurie, considering their time together and how their dynamic affects who was the head coach, he didn't make the final decision on Sirianni's future with the Eagles, speaking of Howie. All I can tell you is that, and I'm going back to 20 whatever it is now, 2021 and Doug, I was told, look, when it comes to the coach, don't blame Howie. That is Jeffrey. When it comes to, and to a certain degree, as I mentioned, the high-level coaching, so that include coordinators. And this plays into that, essentially confirms it. Lurie did make the decision, and only he can effectively answer the question as to why he was not made available to reporters. Obviously, he rarely talks to reporters. He will probably not speak publicly until the owners' meetings in March. He's the guy. That's all we're saying. Howie has more power, But Nick doesn't report to Howie. If that makes sense. He reports
see,
directly.
to me, that doesn't make sense. That's the problem right there. It doesn't make sense. If Howie's got more power, but Nick doesn't report to Howie, how does Howie have more power? Just
because he
of...
trusts him more, because he listens to him more, because he's been around him more, because he called him, the biggest mistake he ever made was going away from, because he's more of a confidant, to use the word that Jeff said. But Howie doesn't have to. Howie can't say, "I'm firing Nick," and obviously he's got to run it by Jeffrey Lurie, and if Jeffrey Lurie agrees, he can. Again, he's his consigliere. If you want to go, Joe was going all Godfather on us. That's what Howie is. But technically, Nick only reports to Jeffrey Lurie. So if you're talking about an organizational flow chart, technically he reports to the owner. And when it comes to coaching decisions, it is all Jeffrey Lurie.
I believe that.
I go back to when I said Howie recommended Josh McDaniels to Jeffrey Lurie. And it turned out to be true. I got a lot of crap for it at the time because people are saying, well, you said it. No, I said he recommended, and Jeffrey said no. He can recommend, he can say things, but when it comes to that particular issue, it's all 100% Jeffrey Lurie.
Okay. And I understand yours and Jeff's, mostly Jeff McClain's stance. Here's where I would question it and the way that it's laid out. How many times a week do you think Nick Sirianni this past year met with Jeff Lurie?
Well, going back to Doug, they would meet once a week. Now, if things start going badly, Jeffrey tends to get more involved. So I can't say late in the season, maybe it increased, but at least once a week. At least once.
How many times do you think he meets with Howie?
A lot more.
Right. But he doesn't report to Howie, he reports to Jeffrey. So the guy you report to, you meet with less. The guy you're partners with, you meet with more.
Well, you're arguing something else. I'm saying that's what it is. That's the structure. Now you can disagree with the structure, but again, that's the structure. And so for those saying, Howie's doing this and Howie's doing that, look, Howie's in charge of building a roster. So anything involved in the roster, blame Howie. He's in charge of binding football, as I said, when they're hiring coaching staff. And Nick doesn't have a particular name in mind. He gathers candidates for Nick to decide. I don't know if that's still the case after such power was taken away, but that's how it's been to this point. And when it comes to big decisions like this big decision, and one of the things the Eagles have tried to spin over the past couple of days is now Nick Sirianni is like, because of who's playing this weekend, is like John Harbaugh and Dan Campbell, a CEO coach. No, he already was. To use Dan Campbell as an example, for people that forget, when he first got to Detroit, and that, obviously they were still a bad team, Anthony Lynn was the offensive coordinator, and he fired Anthony Lynn, and he brought in, the flavor of the month. Ben Johnson is likely going to be the next head coach in Washington. Whenever Detroit loses, no, Nick was like Dan Campbell and John Harbaugh. Now he doesn't have the power to be like them. So now he's like Jason Garrett at the end of his Cowboys run, where he's basically, I don't know what you want to call him, emasculated, neutered. People don't like these adjectives. Make up whatever you like if you want to be softer. That's what happened this week. That's what happened.
All right. So here's, and you don't, I'm asking you to speculate. You can't possibly know this, but you can have certainly a strong opinion on it. Nick said, if he said it once, he said it 3 or 4 times the other day. I have to prove myself. When I was given a job, I had to prove myself. And I think we did by going to the Super Bowl. But we had the season that we did. So I have to prove myself. I don't know if he actually said reprove himself. That's what I was thinking. How does he go about doing that? How is he going to show that he is this was a blip on the radar screen? That this was actually it's all W's and L's?
Oh, I mean, he doesn't care if you win. I mean, if they win, Jeffrey isn't going to care.
Man, so I am waiting. Sorry to interrupt you. April, when do they come out with the schedule? Usually, I think they moved up to
they moved it to May. I think they moved it back.
Oh, back.
Yeah, they moved it back because they've made it into a big, TV show
after the draft. Okay,
yeah.
That is going to be huge because we're going to have to get the schedule and print it out. I'm going to go so far as to print out. These days, nobody prints out shit. Nobody prints out anything. It's on your computer. So
trying to save trees.
Yeah, save those trees. I'm a tree hugger if ever there was one. I will actually print it out because not only is the final number going to be important because we saw it this year, it's when, how, and why you lose. Because the Eagles finished up with 11 wins. Come on, it's 11 wins. How we're 26-4, whatever the number was, up until the bottom fell out of the entire season. It's not just the number, it's when those numbers come up too. So we have to figure out exactly how the Eagles are going to do getting to the end of the season and then the postseason. Because late season W's are more important than September W's, John. I think we all asked Brian Johnson and Sean Desai about that.
And going back, Jeffrey really should have spoken at this press conference because he's the one. And you got to. Marcus had a great column. Marcus Hayes. I know he said how he looked like how he had. And he did. He had bags under his eyes, like I think Marcus said, wind socks. And I don't know, it looked like he was shoveling Jeffrey's driveway all weekend as punishment.
Yeah, but how he likes the 3-day growth, doesn't he? I think he likes.
Well, they all do.
Not the first time we've seen that out of Howie.
You get the playoff hockey beards, but they looked like they got taken to the woodshed. Was Marcus's point, and they did. And the guy who did it doesn't talk, and they're up there, and then people are like, well, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. That's because the guy making the decision doesn't talk, and they gotta walk around things, and they gotta, that's Jeffrey's fault. And a lot of people got mad at me this week because I was pretty harsh on Jeffrey Lurie. I mean, give me a break. I say this guy overall, and he's one of the best owners in the NFL because the rest of these morons, they're even more drastic than he. And I say that facetiously. They're all far richer than I'll ever be. So they got to be bright to a certain degree, but they're very emotional when it comes to their football teams. And he's better than 95% of the owners. I feel very, very comfortable in saying that. At the same time, in this little sort of part of the job, he is irrational. And he doesn't like to talk about his irrationality, and he doesn't like to explain it, and he doesn't like to answer questions about it. And I'm sorry, if you want the pom-poms out, he put these guys in this position, so explain it.
Right. I'll make an outrageous comparison here, and don't take it incorrectly. I'll try and explain as best I can. At one point, Michael Jordan screwed the Chicago Bulls. He'd won 3 straight championships. He said, "See you later, bye." He went to play baseball. There's so many different stories about why he walked away when he did. I don't even care about any of that. We won't take the conversation that far. But then at one point, he just decided, "Yeah, you know what? Let me go back." And he did. And guess what? He wasn't Michael Jordan just yet. It took him some time. They got beat in the Eastern Conference Finals. Why? Maybe because he hadn't played basketball in a year and a half. But then he came back, and rightfully so, everybody expected him to just come back as Michael Jordan. And guess what? He wasn't ready. You can point that out. It doesn't mean Michael Jordan's not the greatest player of all time. He is. But you can point out the fact that he walked away because he just felt like it, and then he came back just because he felt like it. He didn't get the job done. Does that make you a Michael Jordan hater? No. If we point out that there are sometimes issues with Jeff Lurie's ownership and the way he handles things and decisions that are made that don't hit center mark, that's not hating on a guy. That's just pointing out that he's not perfect. No one is, and Jeff Lurie isn't either, even though we think he's one of the best owners in the National Football League.
Yeah, and you said it better than me, so thank you, Joe.
You and I are on the exact same page on that one. All right, offensive coordinator. Is everybody going to get on the same page? No, here's how I'll ask it to you. Who's hiring the offensive coordinator?
Well, I'll say this. It has to be approved by Jeffrey. And, you know, Nick was pretty clear that it can't be somebody from his tree that he knows. He needs fresh ideas, and that is a direct correlate. Doug got the exact same talking to. Has to be fresh, has to be new, has to be outside the organization. So I brought up, you know, the Tommy Reeses of the world who's already off the board anyway, the Frank Reichs of the world, the Mike McCoys of the world, the Jim Bob Cooters of the world. It's not going to be them because they're Nick guys. It's got to be somebody else. And that alone would lean me towards, now, does that mean Nick's not going to have any say in whether, you know, you're talking about Cliff Kingsbury or Kellen Moore, who was in the building yesterday, or Jared Johnson? He'll have some say in that group, but he's going to be given, it's very similar. Think about it. Nick's offense, Brian Johnson. So Nick's got 10 plays. Yeah, Brian's got 10 plays. Pick it out of those 10 plays. Nick, you got 7, 8 candidates. Pick the guy. Maybe he can do that, but he's going to be steered in a direction of candidates that he is not familiar with. You know, uncomfortable is, Joe used it. A bunch of people have been using it. I think that's Jeffrey's goal, to get people uncomfortable, and hopefully that pushes them. And that's Nick, and that's Jalen Hurts. And you know, maybe even some of the defensive players, with a taskmaster coming in, who some of the Miami players didn't like because he's a little too rigid and too old school.
And guess what? I'm good with that. I'm good with that on both fronts, on the offense and the defense, after the way things collapsed. The hottest name last 24 hours surfaced that he's going to interview with the Eagles is Kellen Moore, ex-offensive coordinator of the Cowboys, still offensive coordinator of the Chargers, but with them bringing in a new head coach, an offensive new head coach, Kellen Moore's job might not be his for long, so they're certainly allowing him to talk to the Philadelphia Eagles. And Kellen Moore defines something that you and I have kind of talked about around over the last couple weeks. And this, again, we like Jeffrey Lurie. Let's get on the record. We think Jeff Lurie's a good owner. But you and I have both said that at times he has scapegoated people, that someone has to be held accountable and pay a price when the Eagles don't match expectations. I would not use the word scapegoat for either of the two coordinators that were fired this year, because I think they both were bad enough to be fired. And if you're bad enough to be fired, then you're not being scapegoated. Scapegoating to me means you get something that you don't really deserve, but somebody's got to get it, and you're the most logical kid, so you get it pinned on you. I think Kellen Moore was absolutely scapegoated in Dallas last year. The Cowboy offense was fine, but they got beat in the playoffs again. They didn't want to fire the head coach. Somebody had to go. Jerry just couldn't go. All right, we'll try again next year.
Sounds familiar. Sounds familiar.
But him more so than either of the two coordinators who got their walking papers here in Philadelphia, because I think they both did a lot. I think Kellen Moore was fine the year before, but there had to be some explanation as to why the Cowboys choked again in the playoffs. And if they weren't ready to fire the head coach was going to have to fire the offense coordinator and take over play call. You can see it coming down the road. I don't think it was Kellen Moore's fault. That was just me last year. I thought he got scapegoated. I think he's a good offensive mind. I didn't watch the Chargers week in and week out, so I can't give you detail after detail after detail where it went wrong this year. Certainly when Herbert got hurt at the end of the year, that was a problem. And they had one of their top wide receivers hurt basically for the entire season. One got hurt, then came back, then the other one got hurt, so they didn't have their weapons all year long. I would be okay with Kellen Moore coming here. I think he's a quality offensive coordinator. How about you?
Yeah, I'd be fine. I saw somebody, and I don't want to out people, but I saw somebody, media person, talking about Kellen Moore and Cliff Kingsbury as well, saying, same old. These are fresh ideas. I'm like, what do people think? Well, I'm honest question, Jody. He's 35 years old. He's, Clip is, I don't know how old he is, but he's not that much older.
No,
he's
probably
a little
same
bit
age,
older.
same, right.
Yeah. And in the case of Clip bringing the college concepts to the pros, he's been in, not ground floor. Chip was ground floor, but one of the ground floor guys. What are fresh ideas?
Yeah,
I mean,
please attach your name to fresh ideas.
Yeah.
If you're going to knock somebody else's fresh ideas, well, why don't you enlighten us and tell us who would be a fresh idea?
It's as far as I can guess, Ben Johnson. Well, you're not getting Ben Johnson.
He's getting
number
a head
one.
coaching job,
Yeah, he's getting a head coaching job. So he's fresh ideas right now. Nobody else. Dave Canales gets 6 years from Carolina, which, by the way, David Tepper doesn't learn, and good for Dave Canales, and maybe he becomes a great head coach, and I hope he does become a great head coach. But I mean, what did
good
he
luck
do?
with that owner. There's one where we can say, hey, we'll take Jeff Lurie every day of the week and 19 times for 19 weeks on Sunday over David Tepper. That guy's clueless.
What the hell did Dave Canales do, honestly, other than other than have a good playoff game and make Baker Mayfield look like a competent NFL quarterback again? I mean, I don't understand what people, and they speak with it, I said, with such conviction. Oh, this guy's got fresh ideas. This guy doesn't have fresh ideas. I'd be fine with Kellen Moore. Under the look, I'll be honest with you. And I've been straight from the start. All right, if you use whatever adjective, I know you don't think Brian was scapegoated. I think he was, but use whatever adjective. If you're going to move on from Brian Johnson, I would have let Nick bring in whoever he wanted to bring in, whether it's Jim Bob or whether it's Mike McCoy, or he convinced Frank Reich to take a step back or whatever, whoever he's comfortable. That's the way I would have went. But as far as the fresh ideas, look, I don't know what you people think is fresh ideas. So other than Ben Johnson, I don't know, maybe Jarrett Johnson, because nobody knows him. He's never been a coordinator. I don't know, but I don't think he's bringing CJ Stroud with him.
No.
So I don't know. I'd be fine with it. I'd be fine with any of the names. Kellen Moore, Cliff Kingsbury. I wouldn't be fine, ironically, with Jared Johnson, but that's only an experience thing. He's been a position coach for 1 year, and he did a phenomenal job. But that tells me you're going to learn on the job. There's not. That's not a criticism.
And he's being thrown into the deep end of the pool because Sirianni hinted that he's going to be hands off.
Yeah.
So you really do need someone with some pretty good experience in that position.
So that's the only reason I would shy away from Jared, just because of the lack of experience. But every other name I'd be fine with under the conditions that Nick is operating under.
Yeah, I'm not a Cliff Kingsbury guy. I'd probably be open-minded to those names that have already been thrown out, either have officially interviewed or there is an interview planned or just people speculating. I'm good with most of them. Cliff Kingsbury, I don't think you want to go down that road. I think it's a disaster waiting to happen if the Eagles happen to go that way. We shall see. All right, we'll take a quickie time out here. We have not had D Gunn on with us for months. You catch him on the post-game show. D's had some family stuff that he's had to deal with. But when I reached out to him yesterday, he said, Joe, if you want me to come on it would be my pleasure. So D Gunn carving out some time for us, always appreciative of him. And he still has some of the best relationships with guys in that Eagle locker room. The Eagles made some significant changes coaching-wise this week. D Gunn should be able to provide some light background information for us on how this is going to play with the Eagle veteran players that will be coming back next year. He's McMullen. I'm McDonald. You're listening to Birds 365.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
At Pond Lehocky, we've recovered billions of dollars for our clients, and we're confident we can do the same for you. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured clients obtain some of the largest settlements in Pennsylvania. One conversation is all it takes to help you and your family get back on track. If you've been injured in an accident, give Pond Lehocky a call.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Underdog Fantasy has a way for you to play alongside your favorite football team all season long with their fantasy pick'em game. You pick between 2 to 5 players, select whether they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats, then do what you usually do on a Sunday, watch the games. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. It's a fantasy game, and the Sports Betting Show wants you to get involved. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. When you sign up, use the promo code WIN, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
For the big story on Action News,
search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
You got your Mac guys here, McMullen and McDonald on Birds 365. Hoping to get D Gunn streaming in here in just a couple of minutes. And I'll ask D when we get him on his evaluation and relationship with the quarterback, Jalen Hurts. When we had Joe Santoliquito on, the article that he did, linked the article that he did on Bleeding Green Nation. Very similar to the one he had done years previously with Carson Wentz.
I don't think it was. I don't think it was. I think this one, and I think a lot of people went to that immediately. You know, it's ironic. Joe's reputation is a flowery, features guy, where he generally writes positive things.
See, I disagree with that. I don't think that is Joe's reputation.
Well, no, because of the Wentz thing. I'm saying if you look at,
I think that kind of lays over everything.
I shouldn't have used the word reputation with us, with writers. He's a features, and he generally writes positive features. That's what I meant by that. But yes, to the general public, they think he writes only hit pieces, which is that's what it to us. It's kind of funny because he doesn't. But and this wasn't a hit piece. The Carson, but by the way, the Carson one wasn't either because it was all true, but it was all negative. This wasn't all negative. That's what I meant by I don't think they were similar. But yeah, most of the Carson stuff was negative, but it was, the people that jumped on him there, everything was proven to be true over the long haul. So,
Joe can hold his head up high. And you're right. This was less negative than the Carson piece, but the juiciest part of it, the most in-depth part of it was about the quarterback and his relationships and how he got to the season and where it could have gone wrong and where it could go going forward. They're both quarterback pieces. This one was certainly more than that and spread out. That was more so even Carson Wentz than anything else. But there was a lot in there about Jalen Hurts, and it wasn't all flowers and rainbows about Jalen Hurts. Even though he was an MVP runner-up the year before, there was a regression this past year. And that's why I said what I said about Brian Johnson. I don't think he was a scapegoat because it didn't work. Now, you want to put the blame on Jalen Hurts because he didn't take to the coaching, that their previous relationship, quarterback, coach, quarterback, former player for his father, kid, added all up, their relationship was their relationship. It didn't translate well when it became offensive coordinator and quarterback. That was on Brian Johnson to make it work. Jalen Hurts is coming off the $255 million earning year. I think Brian Johnson was the one who had to figure it out. It was on him to figure it out to make it work for he and Jalen together. I'm not coming down harshly on Jalen on that one. That's why I think there's a big part of the reason.
Well, I think the realism is you pay somebody $255 million. Obviously, you're not going to move on from the quarterback. So we can scratch that out. That's not going to happen, at least right now. So then it becomes, if you're going to assign blame, if you don't want to use the term scapegoat, if you're going to assign blame like Jeffrey Lurie, then you have to assign blame. And he could have went in two directions from my perspective there. He could have said, I want to keep Brian around to make Jalen happy and fired the head coach, and maybe got a new head coach, kept him as offensive coordinator, or he went the way he went. He kept a neutered head coach, and he blew out Brian as his how's that? His a blame placeholder. That's who he blamed for the offensive failings. That's how it worked out. Or
if it was as you're stating, and you may very well be right, did Jeffrey make the right choice? Would the other choice have been better?
Well, I think the better choice would have been door C, keep everybody. That's what I would have done. I would have kept Nick Sirianni, Brian Johnson, Jalen Hurts, and see if they could improve. I look at the whole picture, man, and people forgot that 10-1 start. Boy, people forgot that really quickly. And don't get me wrong, that 7 games was atrocious to end the season. But at the same time, the larger sample size means more to me. But we're talking about the number 3 offense in football, whatever they ended up. I think they ended up 8 or 10. I don't even know. Number 10 in a 32-team league. And they took everything away from the guy whose offense it was. And they said, you can't be involved in this offense. 3-10's not good enough in this stinking league. What? And I got to look this up. If you can look it up while I'm talking, what was Tampa Bay's offense this year?
20. They were the exact same at the end of the year. I think 24th and 24th. They were 24th on offense and 24th on defense. It was weird because I do remember that they happen. How often do you have the exact same ranking?
Yeah.
Yards per game, they were the exact same on offense and defense. And I'm not 100% sure on this, but I'm pretty sure it's 24th on both.
And I'm not picking on Dave Canales. I hope he does a good job. He got a 6-year contract to be a head coach in this league for the 24th ranked offense.
Yeah, but see, here's what you're leaving out, John. Expectations. You're looking at the hard numbers at the end of the season and comparing one to the other. Baker Mayfield with Mike Evans and a bunch of guys named Pete. They weren't expected to be a top 10 offense. They weren't the top 10 offense.
Well, see, if I'm Jeffrey Lurie,
the Eagles finishing 10th, guess what? Not good enough. They had a top 3 offense talent-wise. You're supposed to be in the top 3 with that offense. They finished 10th. That's not good enough.
Well, look, the expectations, yes, I talk about them all the time, dating back to day one. I thought they were unrealistic. So that's baked into it for me. Now, when you talk about...
Do you think expecting an Eagle offense coming into the year with the talent that they had, what had been subtracted, added offense, not defense. We all acknowledge how we kind of let the defense go to shit.
No, I think they should have been better offensively. I think that's fair. But I do think people overrate even the offense a little bit from the perspective of depth, certainly from the perspective. Is DeAndre Swift really that much better than Rachaad White? You saw some of those backup Tampa Bay receivers. At least they have some of the athleticism and some ability to make plays, as we saw down the football field. They're a hell of a lot better than Quez Watkins and company. Cade Otton made plays, drop passes. Dallas Goedert made plays, drop passes. The Eagles have a much better offensive line. They've obviously AJ and Devontae are as good as Mike Evans is. He's aging and he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. He's not the same player he once was. So even offensively, I think, people overrated, certainly from a depth standpoint, what they were dealing with. And what really stood out to me was the receiver position, because it drops off a cliff here. And Tampa Bay at least could come, you know what? This guy can make a play. You put him in space. This guy can make a play. You put him in space. I don't see that from the Eagles. And that's personnel. But the larger picture to me, I can't fathom. Like, I get the emotion in the minute. And Jeffrey, by everyone who saw him walking off the field in Tampa Bay, was very upset. I don't blame him. I came into that game, I said it pretty consistently. I arrived in Tampa saying there is no way Nick Sirianni is going to lose his job. And after that game, I had to rethink it. I said, that was so bad. I can see it in the emotion. But then I think as you step back and you say number 3, number 10, and again, the context of comparing it to the rest of the league, and you should know that you can't find a receiver behind A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. That's not Nick Sirianni's fault. That's Howie Roseman's fault. I think there's a lot of things that come into it. And it ends with, to me, and Howie mentioned this, guy's got a 667 winning percentage over a large sample size, 3 consecutive playoff berths. That's just, for people that don't know, you should know, that is the best winning percentage in Philadelphia Eagles history by a wide margin. All these conversations are quite frankly absurd to me. But we are where we are, and it's because of the overreaction of the owner who won't speak about it. So, yeah, I'm going to continue to criticize him.
Yeah, I'm going to be less so, because I think I knew that Jeffrey's going to do something, because that's his history, and he's been the owner for 30 years, and his history is pretty well documented. He's not, with the collapse being as historic as it was, as great as the start was, as great as the previous year was, the collapse was historic. He had to do something. He wasn't just going to go.
Well, I thought he would got the defensive staff. I assumed he would. He will, and he did.
Who do you think was more responsible for the Eagles' defense being bad this year? Sean Desai or Howie Roseman?
It's a good question. I think it's more personnel related. So
yeah.
I
So
would
if
have
you're
to-
if you're gonna do something that because we're pinning it all on the defense, how we get the out wasn't gonna happen. So somebody had to pay a price.
Well, and I said
that's what we found out
defensively,
about Jeffrey. He decides if you're in or you're out, and he goes down the list. First things first. Howie Roseman. Yeah, I'm not firing Howie. Nick Sirianni. No, I'm not firing Nick. Oh, okay. We can get rid of the offense quarter. We can get rid of the defense.
but I'm not
quarter.
saying
That's the way it worked out.
they shouldn't have fired Sean Desai. I'm saying I expected them to gut the defensive coaching staff. I thought that would be the scapegoats, not only Sean but also Matt and everybody else. I don't expect maybe Tracy Rocker will come back. Trying to think of anybody else. Maybe DK McDonald, but he's a Nick guy, and that was before. Now that's a bad thing to be a Nick guy. So I expected them to gut the defensive coaching staff and step back and say, we're still pretty good offense. We didn't perform up to what we wanted to. And by the way, if they have better ball security from the quarterback, they're probably the exact same stinking offense for the most part. They just turned it over more. And that tends to be a thing, as we saw with Dak Prescott. He had a spike year, and then he came back to normal. I expect Jalen Hurts to do the same and be more conscious of ball security. Yeah, I thought that's the way it would go. And clearly I was wrong.
Right. Well, I mean, not that far off, but I got no problem with somebody on the offense paying a price too, because again, back to expectation. Which was worse this year? Eagles offense, Eagles defense. Of course it was the defense. But as per what you could have expected coming into the year, expectations, yeah, I think the Eagle drop off on where I expected it to be and what the results were about even. That the defense was certainly not as good as I thought it was going to be, but the expectations were less. The offense wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. The expectations were higher. I don't have a problem with either of the coordinators paying for it.
And I just looked it up because I haven't. And PFF, just from the film, graded the Eagles as having the 8th best offense in the NFL.
That's not good enough.
I mean, San Francisco, Detroit, Miami, Baltimore, Dallas, Rams, Bills, then Eagles. Is it good? Did I expect them to be better? Yes. Is that fireable? I don't think it is. Over a large sample size.
Right. And much like the way we've talked about it, we're going to talk about it with our next guest. You do have to take it in the order in which it happened, because the bad end of the Eagles' success was the end of the season. It does sting.
But there's where I would disagree, only from the fact that you don't have to do that, Jody. Jeffrey doesn't have to do that. That's why he went yacht shopping. That's when he took a couple days. You're supposed to calm down. You're supposed to look at it more logically. You don't have to be. You can be. Most people are. But you don't have to be overreactionary. And I assume that's why he took the time to go to St. Martin. And because he didn't want to be that way. And I think he ended up being that way. But I can't tell you that for 100% because he doesn't talk about it.
Right. He didn't talk to us. I believe Derek Gunn is going to talk to us. We got D Gunn ready to go. Man, this works out great. You're going to get to answer the question McMullen and I have just been debating. The moves the Eagles made, firing their offensive coordinator, firing their defensive coordinator, and retaining their head coach. Those were the 3 big decisions for me. They decided to check off 2 of the 3 boxes. Overreactionary for me would have been check all 3 boxes. Fire them all, fire them all, fire them all. Firing only 1, not quite enough for me. John says he would have kept them all. Or no, John said he would have let the defense, which they tried to fix on the fly. How'd that go? Let that be the whole rebuild. Was Jeff Lurie, if we believe Jeff Lurie was behind all of these decisions, which I think we should be, did he overreact in your opinion?
No, I don't think you overreacted. You did not get the result you wanted. When you look at the offense statistically, it wasn't bad. I mean, the numbers across the board were numbers that a lot of teams would have been envious of. But when you looked at the strategy in which they achieved the numbers, in which they moved the ball down the field, it left you scratching your head in a lot of cases in terms of down and distance. They totally abandoned the underneath routes, like a lot of teams are. You look at the 4 teams still remaining that are competing for the Super Bowl. They use the crossing routes. They use the dump down routes. The Eagles totally abandoned that stuff. And if you remember, I tweeted over a month ago, was after the Dallas game. A couple of players had told me, look at how fast Dak gets that bleeping ball out of his hands. It takes our routes too long to develop. So when I was told this, I started watching this more and more. And sure enough, on 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7s, they're going for the intermediate shots down the field. And you see guys standing wide open underneath, and you're going, what the heck are you doing? You want to pick up the first down and move the chains, but you kept playing right in the hands of the opposition. So it was the strategy in which they achieved certain numbers and goals that still left you wanting more. So I will say this, and I've said this before on other platforms. I know we're all bashing and have bashed Jeffrey, Howie, for changing an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator at the same time. I looked at it the other way. Howie and Jeffrey admitted they made a mistake. Yes, after 1 year, but they made a mistake, and they're trying to rectify the mistake. Big Fangio and a new offensive coordinator. So, a lot of times when we know teams make mistakes, they'll give a coaching staff coordinators an additional year to try to work out the problems. And it doesn't work, and then you're right back at square one. I'm saying, look, we're human. We make mistakes. They made mistakes. They made mistakes putting those guys in positions, and now they're trying to rectify them because they do have a nucleus that can get back there and compete for a Super Bowl again in 24.
The expectations, Gunn. So that's a fair point. If the worst thing you can do is double down on a mistake. So if you're in that building and you feel like Brian Johnson's overmatched, I didn't get that feeling, but if they feel that way, I certainly got it at times with Sean Desai. It's best to admit your mistake and turn the page. However, and Jody and I were talking about the expectations. I thought the expectations were out of whack because you're coming off the Super Bowl. And you mentioned they're going to be a Super Bowl contender again. Hopefully they will be. Maybe they won't be. But I know the next offensive coordinator, it's going to be pretty easy for Vic to outpace expectations coming off this year. The new offensive coordinator ain't going to be that easy because you can't just roll out there and say, I'm going to have the 8th best offense in football. So where are we going to be if that's the expectation where you start out, because that's not good enough? Is this guy already behind the 8 ball?
You mean the new guy coming in?
Yeah, new guy coming in.
It depends. Is he coming in to exclusively run Nick Sirianni's offense?
Not according to Nick the other day.
Yeah.
If he's coming in,
carte blanche, so he's got to be better.
Coming in, yes, if he's coming in and he's given the leeway to put his own niche on this offense, and maybe even change a significant portion of what is called Nick's offense, then I think we have to wait and see to give him a fair estimation in terms of whether he's behind the 8 ball or ahead of the curve. If he comes in here and puts his own niche to the offense, carte blanche, and we see productivity right away, you can't really say he's behind the 8 ball. I mean, because again, this Eagles offense was jagged in 23, yet it was a top 10 offense. So we know, because the nucleus, even if Kelce's not coming back, we know the nucleus is there for this offense to do some dynamite things again in 24. But we have no idea what it's going to look like yet.
Well, obviously, to me, the perspective is, obviously, if whoever it is, Kellen Moore, Cliff Kingsbury, insert name, performs, there's no problem. I mean, if you perform and you're a top, you lead the league in offense, you're fine. What I'm saying is, I think go back to 2022. You know, D-Gun, you know how
Yes.
this works.
Yes.
They were stilted at times in 2022. The Indianapolis game, the Houston game. They had some really bad offensive games in 2022 that everybody forgot about because they made it to the Super Bowl. Everybody has hiccups. Everybody has hiccups. And that's why I tend to look at the larger picture. And I look at, all right, the talent on this team. But I mentioned A.J. Brown didn't play in the playoff game. All right. I saw in Tampa Bay up close David Moore making plays. Who's David Moore? Palmer, that kid, making plays, 56-yard touchdown. Eagles lose A.J. Brown.
Disintegrates.
Disintegrates, exactly. Thank you for that word. Completely. Maybe we overrated this team a little bit, personnel-wise, I believe.
22, they had a superior team against an inferior schedule. 23, they had what we would consider a very good roster that had to stand toe-to-toe with the dominant schedule. Now, somehow, some way, they found a way to get to 10-1. And all of a sudden, they meet San Francisco, and I believe San Francisco just took the heart of this team from that point on. And you're right. Once they lost an A.J. Brown, this offense was nowhere near what it should have been. So what's the learning curve here? If you look at the Kansas Cities, Detroit's, teams like that, Tampa Bay's, you find a way with the understudies on their teams. The Eagles have to do a better job of getting understudies. Now, I don't think Julio Jones is walking through that door again in 24. I think his days are done here. But there are going to be some middle-of-the-road free agents out there, whether it's a slot guy or another outside guy that might be able to help you significantly. You just have to do your homework and find that guy. Kansas City basically got back to the AFC Championship game with a bunch of guys who were dropping balls all season like hand grenades.
Yeah.
But they finally
got
it right.
Yeah, tons of hiccups along the way, but they got incrementally better. Rasheed Rice a rookie turns into a playmaker by the time the season has ended. But they had a lot of bad moments, a lot of hiccups along the way. Boy, I guess 667 winning percentage.
Yes.
3 consecutive postseason bursts.
Yes.
That sample size has got to overvalue what the look. The 6 out of 7 was a disaster. Nobody's arguing that. But if I'm Jeffrey Lurie, D-Gun, put on your Jeffrey Lurie hat. He's got to know this is not easy to do.
No, it's not.
To make the playoffs. He's got to know that. Why is he neutering the head coach? And if you don't like that word, use whatever word. Or do you think Nick Sirianni still has power? Because what I saw was a beaten man, a typically energetic guy, a buoyant guy. I saw a beaten man taken to the woodshed. Did you see anything different?
I think I'll classify it as this. I saw a man who's trying to navigate a rudderless ship. I'll put it in those terms. I don't want to say a beaten man. I'll just say a frustrated man who, no matter what he tried to do, it just kept spiraling out of control.
I should have said beaten down. I don't mean he's given up. Beaten down.
Right.
Yeah.
I would say the decision to keep Nick Sirianni is not one that I'm surprised with. How many coaches historically have gone to the playoffs the first 3 seasons of their tenure as a head coach? That just doesn't happen. You have to be, even Doug Peterson, had to build it into a winning team. And if you look at that journey to get to the Super Bowl, that's unheard of. That story is just his legacy in terms of how they got there and knocked off the evil empire. So you got a coach that's been to the playoffs 3 years in a row in his first 3 years as a head coach. And I know everybody's fired Nick Sirianni, okay? What if you had got an Adam Gase in here to replace him?
Right.
What if you had got
they wanted it, T-Gun.
Yeah.
If he would have accepted non-personnel control, he would have been here. Yeah.
What if you got a Josh McDaniels in here? What if you had gotten an Eberflus in here? See, you change.
Not for Eberflus. He could be okay.
Change is not always for the better in that regard. Fire and put everybody on the guillotine. Now, a number of position coaches are still going to be removed. You know, we think it's just the OCs, but a number of these position coaches are waiting for their papers. Heck, they may have already gotten their papers, but the Eagles are so good at keeping stuff quiet, it hasn't come out yet.
Yeah.
So the coordinators are not the only changes. There's going to be significant changes at the position coaches as well. So you're rebuilding the pyramid, so to speak. Okay. So I'm not surprised that they kept Nick Sirianni for one more season. He took this team his second year to a Super Bowl. It fizzled out significantly in 2023. Now the front office is telling him, you've got this year to fix it, and we're going to help you. We're going to pick the OC and DC, and we're going to fix this. See, the problem with that is the NFL is the trickle-down effect. The GM answers to the owner. The head coach answers to the GM. The players answer to the coach. See, so everybody has a fall guy except who? Except the owner. It's his toy. It's his toy shop. See.
And he has the right to do whatever he wants. I always say, Jeffrey, at the end of the day, he can do whatever he wants.
Absolutely.
But you're right.
Store.
I mean, Diana Rossini, Joe Barry's going to interview to be a part of Vic Fangio's staff. No surprise there. Vic Fangio is going to hire those defensive coaches.
Yes.
Whomever the offensive coordinator is, if they stay true to what they said at this presser, they're going to hire the assistants.
Yes.
And Tim McManus asked the question, he office spaced him, our buddy Tim. Basically, what is it that you do here? You know, the two Bobs, if you're an Office Space fan, what is it that you do here? I do not see how this can possibly work, what they've done to Nick Sirianni. That's my problem. If you're Jeffrey Lurie and you want to go this way and you want to say it's not good enough, 6 out of 7, historic collapse, fine. Show the courage of your conviction. Fire the head coach and start over. And then at least you can have this. Now he's straddling the fence. He's got a head coach with no power. How is that going to work?
We're going to find out. We're going to find out. Let's remember, when they hired Doug Peterson, they hired a defensive coordinator before they hired a head coach.
Yeah. Well, they hired Jonathan before. They hate to say it, but they hired Jonathan before they hired Nick.
And they had a good measure of success in that regard. So we're going to find out. But here's a more interesting question. Let's say it doesn't pan out for Sirianni in 24. Let's say this team, heaven forbid, has a losing record with a new OC, a new DC in 24.
They all get fired.
They all get fired. So if you're an OC or DC, you're coming here in a 1-year agreement? So what happens there?
And Joe is, because he's going to be getting closer to $4.3 million. He was getting down in Miami. I guarantee you that he's not coming in on a hometown discount. For it to happen the way that
there's a lot of,
he's going to be one of the highest paid coordinators.
But that's even a worse situation. You brought in these big name OCs and DCs. The head coach gets fired in 24. What are you going to do with it?
It'll all be dumped on Nick. It's going to be Nick's fault.
No, I'm saying, but if you fired Nick after the 24 season, what do you do with these high-priced OC and DC you brought in to help him to put him on a pedestal?
See, that's just
so. Then you even have a bigger mess.
Do you care about Jeffrey's money? I don't.
No, I don't either. But I'm saying that is a powder keg topic we would have to talk about next offseason.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Oh, and it could absolutely happen that way.
Absolutely.
But let me ask you this, D. Gunn.
Yes.
John's posed a question now a couple times. What exactly, like Tim McMahon, what exactly are you going to do, Nick? As CEO is the term that's thrown around. I'll call him the CEC instead. Chief Executive in charge of culture, because that's what its job is now. It's culture related. He's not running the offense. He's going to show up for a couple more defensive meetings, so be ready for that, Vic Fangio.
Yeah.
Is he really going to tell Vic what to do? I don't think so. So his main job is going to be the culture builder, to keep everybody on the same page and the focus and the 5 core values and the like. Can he do that? Do you think he's capable of doing that this year, D-Gun?
Hey, for the money he's making, why not? That's a part of his MO. That's part of his MO. You know, we snickered at when we heard the story about him talking about trees and stuff, right? When they were 2 and 5.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, that
went
story
over well with the players.
That story took root, and that little sapling became a mighty oak to get him to the playoffs, right?
True.
You know, we've laughed at some of the stories we've heard about inspirational videos and messages he's given the team before big games at home or on road trip. So he will continue along those lines. If he's about the culture, he's the perfect man for the job because he already has the ear of players on that team. All right. So they know what he's going to try to sell them, and they've already bought in. Now, what's interesting is going to be, and you know, this is a story that's going to become a hot topic story down the road. Eventually, Devonta Smith is going to get his money. It could be this year, could be next year. What do you do with one of the other receivers? Because no team has 2 $100 million receivers. You can't keep them both. What are you going to do? That could happen this year. May not happen until next year, but you have to look at that. It could happen this year.
I think there's going to be a lot of personnel decisions that maybe aren't expected coming this offseason. That plays into it as well. At Real D Gunn, make sure you follow D Gunn on Twitter. Good to see you, by the way.
Good to see you guys. Yeah.
Last one for me will be about the quarterback, because I think the quarterback is kind of skating underneath all this because I think he was part of the offensive regression as well, along with the head coach and the offensive coordinator. You can't move on from Jalen Hurts, nor should they want to move on from Jalen Hurts. I'm not trying to say that, but obviously it seems to me he wants to make, and I'm talking about Jeffrey here, D-Gun, he wants to make people uncomfortable again. And maybe he felt Jalen got a little too comfortable with a family friend, a little too comfortable with Nick Sirianni's offense. Is that the way you see it?
You know what, John? That's a fair question, but I can't give you a fair answer because I've not heard the dynamics behind that. You know, we've heard about how close they were, so on and so forth. But I think Jalen is mature enough to understand that Brian had a job to do. No matter how close they are, Brian had a job to do. He just didn't do it to the best of his ability. And Nick, you know, if what we've heard is true in terms of Jalen constantly audibling at the line of scrimmage, whose job is it to take that away from him? Starts with the head coach. But we kept hearing that Jalen had the leeway to change plays at the line of scrimmage, maybe too much so.
I think so.
So the head coach, it's the head coach's job to rein him in. Didn't appear to happen. So now we got to get back to find someone who can get into the ear and the soul of Jalen from 2022 that made him the runner-up to Patrick Mahomes for the league MVP. You know, and whoever that offensive coordinator is will come in here with a clean slate. It won't be buddy. You making a whole lot of money. You one of the highest paid players in this profession. It's not just a sport. It is a business. You are a businessman, first and foremost. You must expedite your level of play. And then it may entail learning a whole new system for Jalen. Well, so be it. We have to get you back to that status that people started talking to you about being elite in 2022, putting you on that elite pedestal because you tailed off in 23 for whatever the reason, you know. So whoever the new OC is has to be somebody with a little, I like to say, John Wayne true grit in them. Come in here, not afraid to speak their mind, not afraid to get in players' faces, especially the franchise quarterback. And if you hurt feelings, I'm hurting your feelings to make you better individually and collectively as a unit. You can't, some old crusty C. I'm not looking for the old crusty C captain because that's not going to happen. But you're going to bring somebody in here with the ability and with the gumption of speaking their mind. You know, let's stop this mess now. It doesn't have to be Nick Sirianni yelling all the time. You think about it, John and Jody. Nick Sirianni did a lot of yelling in training camp.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And it was purposeful, I think.
And it worked up to a certain point. Okay. So now you need somebody in here who needs to establish his personality right from the first time they meet on their practice field in April or May.
By the way, I think that Gunn, they got the crusty old sea captain. He's just on defense. They got that. They got big.
They covered that. And by the way, as Joe Santoliquito told us earlier in the show, and I agree with him, they had a guy who could push Jalen's buttons and change Steichen. And nobody would call him a crusty old sea captain.
No.
So you don't
Although Shane could drop an F-bomb better than anybody.
Yeah. It's funny. The crusty old sea captain in today's football, especially offensively, is a guy in his mid to late 30s or 40s. These young, innovative minds now. So they're the crusty old sea captains nowadays.
It'll be very interesting to see who that crusty old sea captain is for the Eagles when they hire their OC. D-Gun, we always expedite our information when we get you on. Thank you very much for doing it today. Always appreciate it when we get you on, D-Gun. Thanks, buddy.
Appreciate you having me on, gents. Anytime.
Thanks,
D-Gun. Appreciate it.
Very own D-Gun here with us on Birds.
Yeah, with Shane, I was always that guy could go from on camera and be the nicest, most congenial, and then he'd get off camera, F bomb. Amazing how he could toggle between that.
And when on the sidelines, wasn't always the nicest guy. You got to be able to get your opinion across. If it's forcefully, so be it with your quarterback. All right, he's McMullen. I'm McDonald. Quickie timeout. We'll come back, put a bow on the show here on Birds 365.
Any professional sports coach will tell you there's no substitution for preparation. At McMullen Associates, that is a tenet by which we live. We prepare from day one for victory. Anything less is not acceptable.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction, go with trust,
Go Birds!
and go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Underdog Fantasy has a way for you to play alongside your favorite football team all season long with their fantasy pick'em game. You pick between 2 to 5 players, select whether they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats, then do what you usually do on a Sunday, watch the games. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. It's a fantasy game, and the Sports Betting Show wants you to get involved. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. When you sign up, use the promo code WIN, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Appreciate both D Gunn and Joe Santoliquito hopping on with us here today on Birds 365. It was a tumultuous week for the Birds, to say the least. Don't know if it's going to be as tumultuous next week, but the big question will be Monday. J-Mac, will we have the new offensive coordinator in place for the Philadelphia Eagles by the time we get back Monday?
Oh, I don't think so. I think they're going to take their time when it comes to the offensive coordinator and try to at least make it seem like they're casting a wide net, so to speak. And other than, evident, and they wanted Vic for a long time, so it's understandable with Vic Fangio, at least a little bit different. And Joe Barry, as I said, will interview for a job with staffs on both the Eagles and the Bears. Eagles are up first, though, so they'll get the first opportunity. Obviously, he's a Vic Fangio. He ran that scheme in Green Bay, and his history is with linebackers, so he would be presumably interviewing to be the linebackers coach, which would be, in theory, a pretty big upgrade. So, maybe it seems like they're going to have a much better staff on the defensive side of the ball at the bare minimum.
Right, and I think they would have thrown a wide net out for defense, too, if Fangio hadn't become available. But he did, so they acted quickly, so I'm with you. They'll probably take their time on the offensive side. We shall see. Unless Shane Steichen gets fired, and then they'll get him back there as soon as possible. But
he's a Nick guy. I don't know. They said no.
Oh,
Nick
you
guy.
Got a point there.
Yeah.
Say there'd be a 180 for you. I think both Howie and Jeffrey would do a quick 180 and go, yeah, but Shane. So Fangio was here too. So I don't want to say they did a 180. They'd be doing a 180 on Shane. He's not coming back, so I'm with you. I don't think we'll have more speculation on the offensive coordinator come Monday. We need you back here on Birds 365. I'm going to be back in 22 hours. Johnny Mac's going to be back in not 22 hours, 2 days. When I give you the 2 and 2, that's 2 days over the weekend. Everybody have a great weekend. Get back with us on Birds 365 come Monday.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.